A penny, doubled every day for 31 days, is worth more than $10 million. A lump sum taken on day one leaves you with less than a third of that. Welcome to Whispering Pages. If you're here just for the summary, skip to the next chapter. For the rest of us, let's ease in. Notice the sounds in the room. Let the weight of your body settle. The brain in its final minutes before sleep is unusually open. What you hear tonight settles more deeply than anything absorbed at noon. Tonight, The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy, 2010, a book about one idea. Small choices, repeated consistently over time, produce results so dramatic they look like magic. So let's begin. Get comfortable. Close your eyes if you'd like. And let's whisper through this one together. Darren Hardy didn't come to these ideas in a classroom or a consulting firm. He came to them at 6 in the morning, woken up by the sound of iron hitting concrete. His father was a single parent and a former university football coach, the kind of man who had a no pain, no gain sign painted on the garage wall and never missed a workout in his life. Rain, sleet, snow, he was out there in his shorts and a tattered sweatshirt every single morning. You could set your watch by it. Darren had more chores than most kids, a long list waiting for him every afternoon, and getting behind in school simply wasn't an option. His father's guiding philosophy: if your competitor is smarter or more talented or more experienced, you work 3 or 4 times as hard. No excuses. If you fall short, you make up for it in effort. That upbringing wasn't comfortable, but it gave Darren something rare, a direct experience of the compound effect before he ever had a name for it. By age 18, he was earning a 6-figure income. By 24, more than $1 million a year. By 27, a business doing $50 million in revenue. He went on to become the publisher of Success magazine, where he spent years studying and interviewing the world's top performers, asking the same question over and over: what actually creates extraordinary success? The answer was always the same, and it was always quieter than people expected. The compound effect is the principle of reaping huge rewards from a series of small, smart choices. That's it. Nothing complicated. Nothing glamorous. The steps, in the moment, don't feel significant. In fact, they often feel almost too small to bother with. Cutting 125 calories from your daily diet doesn't feel like a transformation. Walking an extra 2,000 steps doesn't feel like a life change. Working through 10 pages of a good book before bed doesn't feel like an education. But that's exactly the point, and exactly where most people get tripped up. We've been conditioned to look for dramatic effort producing dramatic results. We expect something that feels significant. When we don't feel it, we stop. We quit the gym after 8 days because we're still overweight. We stop practicing the piano after 6 months because we haven't mastered anything. We stop contributing to our savings because it doesn't seem to be adding up to much. And in doing so, we cut off the very process we needed to stay in. Hardy uses a story to make this visible. Imagine 3 friends who are roughly equal in every way: same income, same neighborhood, same general lifestyle. One of them, Scott, begins making tiny positive changes. 125 fewer calories per day. A little more walking. 10 pages of a good book each night. Another friend, Brad, makes equally small negative changes. A little more rich food, a bit more TV, 1 extra drink per week. The third friend, Larry, just keeps doing what he's always done. For the first 10 months, you can't see any difference. At 18 months, the differences are barely noticeable. But at 31 months, Just under 3 years, Scott has lost 33 pounds, earned a promotion, and is thriving in his marriage. Brad has gained 33 pounds, is struggling at work, and his marriage is in trouble. Larry is exactly where he started, except a little more bitter about it. The behaviors that created those outcomes? They ran in parallel, invisibly, for more than 2 years, until suddenly they didn't. One of the most important things Hardy points out in the chapter on choices is this: most of your decisions aren't really being made by you. 95% of everything we feel, think, do, and achieve is the result of a learned habit, something formed over years, running quietly in the background, making choices on our behalf without our awareness. We think we're at the wheel. Most of the time, we're passengers. He calls this sleepwalking. You consume an entire bag of chips and realize only afterward you weren't even hungry. You get 2 hours into a late-night screen spiral and suddenly remember you had something important to prepare. You snap at someone you love for no good reason. Not because you intended to, but because you weren't paying attention. Your habits made the choice before you had a chance to. The remedy Hardy proposes is deceptively simple: tracking. Before you can change a behavior, you have to see it clearly. He describes the moment his accountant confronted him in his early 20s, when he was making serious money in real estate but found himself owing well over $100,000 in taxes, and had no idea where the money had gone. His accountant handed him a small notepad and told him to write down every single cent he spent for 30 days. Not just the big purchases. Everything. Down to 50 cents for air in his tires. The effect was immediate. The simple act of having to record a purchase made Hardy think twice before making it. He found himself choosing not to buy things just so he wouldn't have to open the notepad. Awareness, he realized, changes behavior before you've done anything else. He has used tracking in every area of his life since then: spending, eating, exercise, relationships, sales calls. The principle is the same regardless of the category. You cannot manage or improve what you haven't first measured. The second idea Hardy introduces in the Choices chapter is personal responsibility. And he takes it further than most. At 18, he heard a speaker ask an audience what percentage of a relationship each person was responsible for. 50-50? 60-40? The speaker wrote on the board, 100 and 0. You take 100% of the responsibility, with zero expectation of receiving anything in return. Only then, he said, does a relationship have a real chance. Hardy absorbed this and applied it to everything. Not just relationships, his career, his finances, his health. Whatever was happening in his life, it was the result of his choices. Not his circumstances, not his luck, not anyone else. This wasn't a punishment. It was a liberation. If everything was a result of his choices, then changing his choices could change everything. He also reframes luck here. Richard Branson, asked whether luck played a part in his success, gave an answer Hardy never forgot. Yes, luck is all around us, every day. The difference is what you do when it arrives. Hardy breaks luck into 4 components: preparation, attitude, opportunity, and action. The first 2 you build over time. The third arrives on its own. The fourth is entirely yours. The third chapter of The Compound Effect is about habits, and Hardy opens it with a story of a teacher walking through the forest with a young student. The teacher points to a tiny sprout pushing up through the soil and asks the boy to pull it up. He does so easily with his fingers. Then the teacher points to a knee-high sapling. A little effort, and up it comes. Then a tree as tall as the boy. He strains, throws his whole weight into it, uses sticks as levers, and finally succeeds. Then the teacher gestures toward a great oak so tall the boy can barely see the top. The boy looks at it and says, simply, "I'm sorry. I can't." The teacher's reply, "You've just seen the power that habits will have over your life. The older and deeper a habit, the harder it is to uproot." But here's the thing Hardy returns to again and again: habits are learned, which means they can be unlearned. The brain forms what neuroscientists call a groove, a series of connected neurons that carry the thought patterns of a particular habit. Every time you activate that groove, you strengthen it. Every time you leave it dormant, it weakens. And when you form a new habit, you're carving a new groove. The goal is to carve the new one deep enough that it eventually takes over. Before you can change habits though, you need to know what's driving them. Hardy introduces a concept he calls willpower. Willpower, he argues, is the wrong tool for the job. It's finite, it exhausts, and when you're tired or stressed or uncomfortable, it evaporates. What holds firm is a deeper reason, a motivating force strong enough to pull you through the moments when the habit feels impossible to maintain. He uses the image of a plank. A 10-inch wide, 30-foot plank on the ground. Would you walk it for $20? Of course. But what if that same plank was suspended between 200-story buildings? Same $20. Would you still walk it? Almost certainly not. Now, what if your child was on the other building, and that building was on fire? You'd walk it without hesitation. The danger hasn't changed. The only thing that's changed is your why. So what is your why? Hardy asks this carefully. He's not looking for noble humanitarian answers. He's looking for the real thing, the motivation powerful enough to get you out of bed before you feel like it, to make the difficult call, to stay the course when everything in you wants to stop. Sometimes that motivation is love. Sometimes it's something you want to prove, or an injustice you want to overcome. He gives the example of Anthony Hopkins, whose learning difficulties as a child left him labeled a problem student, resentful and depressed, and who channeled all of that anger into acting until he became one of the greatest actors alive. The nobility of the fuel matters far less than its heat. Hardy offers 5 practical strategies for eliminating bad habits. Identify the trigger, the who, what, where, and when that precede the behavior. Clean house literally, removing whatever enables the habit. Swap the bad behavior for a healthier one that delivers a similar sensation. Ease in gradually if the habit is deeply entrenched. Or jump in all at once, since some people find it easier to abandon many habits simultaneously than to chip away at them one by one. He also recommends running a vice check every few months, deliberately abstaining from a favorite vice for 30 days to confirm that you're still in charge of it, rather than the other way around. Installing good habits follows a different logic. Rather than subtraction, Hardy recommends thinking in additions. Instead of "I can't have this," ask "What can I add?" A friend of his who wanted to stop watching TV didn't fight the urge directly. He replaced it with photography and family time, and found he simply no longer had the desire to sink into the screen. Hardy also emphasizes accountability, making your intentions public, finding a success partner, building competition and community into the new habit to keep momentum alive in the early weeks. Hardy describes momentum, what he calls Big Mo, as one of the most powerful and enigmatic forces in human life. You can't see it. You can't reliably summon it on demand. But when it shows up, everything changes. He reaches for physics to explain it. Newton's first law: objects at rest tend to stay at rest. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion. The couch potato tends to remain a couch potato. The achiever who has found their rhythm tends to keep achieving. Getting something moving from a standing start requires an enormous expenditure of energy. But once it's moving, once that rhythm is established, maintaining it takes far less effort than it took to begin. Think of a hand-pumped water well. You grab the lever and start pumping. Nothing happens. You pump harder, faster. Still nothing. It takes time for the pipe to create the suction that draws water up from below the surface. Most people give up at this point. They pump for a few weeks, see no results, and abandon the lever. But if they had kept going, just a little longer, they would have gotten a few drops. Then a trickle. Then a full, steady stream. And once the stream is flowing, you don't need to pump as hard. A slow, consistent rhythm keeps the pressure up. But the moment you let go of the lever for too long, the water falls back underground. You're at square one, and the only way back is to pump hard all over again. Hardy says this is how most people live, in fits and starts. They build momentum, achieve a breakthrough, and then coast, only to find that coasting killed the momentum entirely. And then they have to fight their way back to where they were. The antidote is routine. Hardy is almost evangelical about this. He shares his own morning and evening rituals in detail, waking before 5 in the morning, a gratitude practice in the first 8 minutes, working through something instructional for 30 minutes while the coffee brews, then 1 hour of completely focused work on his most important project, before he even opens his messages for the day. In the evening, he cashes out, reviewing how the day actually went against how he planned it, logging insights in a journal, and working through 10 pages of something inspirational before sleep. His rationale is practical. You can't control what happens in the middle of your day. You can control the bookends. If the beginning and end of every day are protected by strong routines, you've guaranteed a minimum quality of performance no matter what chaos arrives in between. He also cautions against overdoing it. A friend who hated exercise resolved to work out 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. Hardy told him gently, that schedule won't last. The goal isn't the most intensive possible commitment for the next 60 days. The goal is the minimum sustainable commitment that you can maintain for the next 50 years. Start with more if you need to build momentum. But design your way toward the version of the habit that you'll still be doing when you're older, slower, busier, and less inspired than you are right now. And one last thing about momentum that Hardy returns to quietly throughout the book: consistency matters more than intensity. 2 planes traveling between the same cities, one that stops and restarts at every airport along the route, and one that flies straight through, will not arrive at the same time, even if the stopping plane travels faster in the air. The energy required to stop and restart, to rebuild speed from zero each time, costs far more than the energy required to simply keep moving at a moderate pace. Winning the race, Hardy says, is about pace. Be the tortoise. In the final 2 chapters of the book, Hardy turns to 2 forces that quietly shape everything we do: our inputs and our associations, and then he introduces the concept of acceleration. Your brain, he explains, was not designed to make you happy. It was designed to keep you alive. Its default setting is to scan for threat, lack, and danger. This is why consuming hours of news media each day, murders, crises, economic warnings, political conflict, isn't just depressing. It actively shapes your thinking, your expectations, and your creative output. What you consume becomes the lens through which you see the world. Hardy tracks the habits of a successful executive who was spending 3.5 hours per day with news media without realizing it. By switching that time to instructional audio during his commute and genuine family time in the evenings, the man reported feeling less anxious and more focused than he had in years, without making any other significant changes. The second influence is your associations, the 5 people you spend the most time with. Research from Harvard social psychologist David McClellan suggests that your reference group determines as much as 95% of your success or failure. You can't help but absorb the habits, attitudes, and income levels of the people surrounding you. Their influence is so gradual it feels like nothing. Like floating on an inner tube, convinced you're still in the same spot, until you look up and discover the current has carried you half a mile down the shore. Hardy asks you to sort your associations into 3 categories: those you need to dissociate from entirely, those you can afford only in limited doses, and those you should actively seek out and expand. He spent over 1,000 hours learning from his mentor Jim Rohn, almost entirely through books and audio. Proximity to ambition raises your own. Acceleration is the final idea, the multiplier effect of doing slightly more than expected at critical moments. When you hit the wall in a workout and push out 5 more repetitions, those extra repetitions don't just add to the total. They multiply the impact of the session. The same principle applies in business, in relationships, in any area where a small additional effort at the right moment creates a disproportionately large result. Now for a few honest observations. The Compound Effect is an excellent book at its best, vivid, practical, and genuinely motivating. But it is a book for people who already believe in the system. Hardy doesn't spend much time addressing the structural conditions that make consistency harder for some people than others: financial stress, caregiving demands, health challenges, or simply being in an environment where good choices are harder to make and track. The 3 friends story assumes equal starting conditions. Most lives don't offer that. There's also something worth noting about the book's definition of success, which is primarily financial and professional. Hardy gestures toward relationships and health, but the center of gravity is unmistakably entrepreneurial. If your goals live elsewhere, you'll need to do some translation work. And one gap the book doesn't fill: if you want a deeper understanding of why habits form and change the way they do, Charles Duhigg's The Power of Habit goes further on that specific question, mapping the cue, routine, and reward structure that Hardy describes more intuitively. The Compound Effect gives you the why and the urgency. Duhigg gives you the wiring diagram underneath. Before you sleep tonight, carry one thought. Somewhere in your daily routine is a small change you've been considering but haven't made. Something almost too modest to mention. Hardy would say that's exactly the one to start with. Sleep well. And we'll see you at Whispering Pages for the next one.